Most AI projects don't fail because the technology's bad. They fail because companies try to scale AI before they build the systems, the guardrails, and the accountability to control it.
There is no bolt-on with AI.
That's Radha Rajagopalan, Chief Delivery and Technology Officer over at Ascendion, where he helps global enterprises build AI-native systems that can actually scale in the real world.
It's one thing, everything in a controlled environment, but when you start scaling, that's when things fall apart.
You'll discover why most AI proof of concepts collapse at enterprise scale, what happens when governance is just an afterthought, why the future belongs to companies that prioritize consistency before speed, and what happens when AI systems learn from bad patterns.
One word: disaster. Organizations that focus on creating these control systems that produce consistent results at scale are the ones that will survive.
I'm your host, Ben Fanning. AI Native Leaders starts here. Radha Rajagopalan, Chief Delivery and Technology Officer over at Ascendion. Welcome to AI Native Leaders, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. Thank you for having me here.
Everybody is talking about AI as intelligence, but in your world, which includes delivery, execution, outcomes, what is AI actually doing inside the enterprise today that wasn't possible before?
AI is evolved very clearly, right? Looking at AI purely from a perspective of an execution engine, right? That is how it all started. Majority of the clients, when they started working with AI, it was purely used as an intelligence vehicle. But what it has evolved now is the complete workflow, right, of execution, right? So it's orchestrated, it's executed, it's mapped to the business outcomes today as we see it. Before the evolution of AI, humans used to plan and execute their task in a specific order. Intelligence was premeditated, and that is how it used to be. Systems were supporting from an execution perspective of those tasks. With AI coming in, and they were evolving pretty rapidly, the shift today is that it started with humans planning and executing, with systems to support them, and then AI to think intelligently. And now, if you look at it, the whole new shift now is that AI orchestrates and executes massive workflows in the enterprise.
If you had to break down what a team used to do, like, are they sitting at their computer coding versus what's happening now? Maybe paint the picture before and after.
Yeah, I think before, the programming world used to design, architect, go through a series of well-defined manual process, if you will. Ideate, create systems of architecture, put together a design, start coding, start testing. It's a manual SDLC cycle. Of course, tools were always there to assist them, but each one of those components is a software development lifecycle that's done by humans in a specific set order. That used to be how we used to operate in the past. Think about complex problems, divide those problems, develop those complex algorithms, develop those systems of architecture and design, pick up your tool stack, it's Java, it's Python, it's C, it's C++, and databases and so on and so forth. An army of people use it and code, and then the code gets tested, and then it gets deployed into productions, and all of that used to be completely people dependent in the past. And that's why you see teams of scale coming to solve problems and execute programs, deploy them into production. And today, bulk of that load now is completely agentified.
Where are leaders still underestimating this shift from the old stuff that teams are able to do, from what now can happen in the system? Because for our listeners, Radha's got a unique position, right? You're on the receiving end of, hey, we've got to build this and implement for the customer. So you're seeing all this stuff come in, and you're the guy, right, that has to design, organize all of your people, all of your systems, all of your agentic agents to make it happen. What are leaders underestimating?
A single important thing that people miss out is that your proof of concept that you've been working on with this technology is not the end result, right? It's one thing. It's one thing. Do everything in a controlled environment, but when you start scaling, that's when things fall apart, right? Controlled data sets, controlled context has been provided for AI systems to test and experiment. And you actually take it to a larger audience and scale the solution to thousands of users, put it in your customer's hand when they start interacting with the systems. If there are no guardrails, if there are no proper verification, validation of these newer generation LLMs that are generating output out of it at scale, that's where things fall apart, right? Doing a proof of concept in the laboratory is easy, but taking it to a large scale implementation, putting it to your customer. Imagine a customer comes into your system and things fall apart. And that breaks the trust completely. That's a single most large.
You're talking about this in a way that makes me think you've probably seen this actually happen. What's been one of your favorite nightmares in terms of, you don't have to name the customer, but where like help people understand in color, like this came in like this, and let me tell you what happened downstream when we started putting our tools into play when it wasn't done right.
Very pertinent question in my part of the world, right? People rush up. Obviously, everybody wants to be on the bandwagon of artificial intelligence and how to use and consume.
Sure.
It starts with defining a proof of concept, proving technology that works. And what happens is that during the transition from being a proof of concept exercise to scale and productionize, guardrails, governance, all of that is an afterthought.
In AI, it's not, it's inherently, or it can be creative and innovative based on the human behind it, because you're asking more questions, things are changing in the marketplace, and you need to adapt. How can you expect a company to lead with the guardrails first when the thing that they originally asked you to do may be changed?
The shift that we see today is that we as humans will have to own the systems and governance, right? That's establishing the governance and security protocols. That's establishing the guardrails that you talked about, how compliant the systems are, the biases and judgments that a large language model of GenAI perhaps would output. So all of that is a very human-centric approach. So humans should own the systems and governance and guardrails, and agents do the rest of the work for you, right? If they start to work in tandem in this structure, then your chances of success when you see scale, when you move to scale, is almost guaranteed, I would say. Given the technology, there's always this 1-2% chances of things. You do hear a lot of things about hallucination, GenAI is spitting out some wrong answers, all of that stuff. But I can tell you that if these two things are synchronized and put in pieces from the beginning of what you do, not as an afterthought, you have a very good chance of scaling and controlling it.
You mentioned GenAI and you mentioned AI agents. How do you explain these two things to people who all they're doing is using ChatGPT? They've never really thought about GenAI and AI agents. How do you explain it to them?
GenAI is a form of AI technology at the end of the day, right? As the names suggest that, for example, text-driven, most of the cases GenAI is actually text producing a system at the end of the day. It's trained on massive amounts of data. The models are trained on massive amounts of data around the world. People harvest data, label them and train them. It predicts based on the questions that you ask, what should be the output that it needs to generate. And it's trained on machine learning models, very huge machine learning models on huge data sets. So obviously, any model that gets trained with specific data sets, the scope of it answering or generating text, predict every word that comes out of the system, is actually an algorithm that works behind the scenes by you to do the closest match and then produces output. So obviously, biases are normal, right? If you have 90% of the data that's dense, and then 10% of the data that's very sparse. And if you have questions of provoking on the 10% of the data, obviously the biases will kick in, right? So you can see sometimes things can go wrong. Gen AI, well, multimodal. Now you have model systems that can generate images, video, text, audios. Technologies has evolved as we speak.
So it's generating based on the learning based on the learning it has. And where it doesn't have learning, that's where things can start to get fringe.
That's correct.
And you've got to identify those as an executive.
Yeah, even with the things it does learn, if there are biases in the data, if it's trained on poor quality data, it's garbage in and garbage out at the end of the day. And that's how it works. Right? And that's why, I keep harping on the same point, humans to govern, humans to control, humans to verify and validate, right? Humans to provide the right context for the LLMs to act accordingly. That becomes very important.
Your customers are coming to you and they need you to create for them, right? AI-based solutions, but you're not probably going to get great data half the time. Maybe you're probably going to get terrible data. And you still have to do big things with that. And I think this is an issue that every leader's probably thinking about. They want AI results, but they have terrible data. What do you do when you have terrible data or you have so much data, like legacy data, you don't know if it's good or not, but you got a lot of it and you need AI results? What do you do in those situations? And maybe even walk us through a situation where you had terrible data and it had to make magic with it.
Most of the organizations would have evolved over a period of time. The systems have evolved. Their database systems and application systems have changed quite frequently in the last. Imagine an organization that is 100-year-old, and if you've got to assimilate all of that data, you get all kinds of data sets from them, right? Dealing with noisy data has been a big challenge ever since the industry has born, right? So that's how it has always been.
So what do you do when you've got the noisy data problem?
Establishing a very strong data foundation, right, becomes an important aspect. For any enterprise to work with any of these AI systems, whether it is Agentic, using LLMs or natural language processing, and so on and so forth, combining that with the enterprise data. The enterprise data needs to be cleansed and transformed to an extent that it is consumable, producing the most accurate result possible. Right? That's step number one, right? That's a mammoth exercise, right?
So you're using AI to clean up bad data, so then AI can use that to go off and do bigger and better things.
Right. So AI in the application, AI in the engineering. If you use AI in the engineering, particularly data engineering as a discipline, that's when you cleanse the data, make the data more usable, bring it to an accuracy level that is acceptable for the downstream AI systems to start consuming it. That's production grade, right? That's quality data that you want to consume.
So it's like you need an AI, you need like the equivalent of like the data janitorial staff.
Yes.
To come and clean.
In simple terms,
and a lot of companies may be trying to use their own human beings to clean up their data. But when they come to you guys, you're like, no. We have developed engineering to help clean the data up faster.
That is correct. That is correct. So we have methodologies, we have got tools around AI that we have built. We have a platform called AAVA. We have on top of AAVA, we have something called as the Data Studio, which actually looks at your end-to-end data. Like we actually call it as data lifecycle management, right? And data engineering. And
data
these are all
lifecycle management.
Yeah, data lifecycle management, where we map how your data transitions from being produced on the source, that is from transactional systems, to decision making in AI. So how do we manage this entire life cycle when data is transitioning from point A to B to C to D? how does it change itself? And that's where the disciplines of data engineering, all of that stuff come.
Can you give us an example of how long it took before you were using your agentic AI process to clean the data versus the human cleaning the data?
One example of a client having more than a terabyte of data from their systems, old aging systems and platforms needed to be completely optimized and migrated to the most modern technology that AI can consume, right?
Okay.
Manual effort and labor easily in a year. And now with AI coming into play, that gets compressed to 2.5 months. Things have evolved, as I said, with Agentic coming into play, you create highly specialized tasks, works at pace, produces consistent result. You marry all of your Gen AI constructs and AI systems into the agent. So the agent sort of acts as a task, well-defined task that uses all of the skills that AI brings in and execute as part of an workflow, right? And you have single agent tasks or multiple agents coming together to work with. It's very important for us to understand these two things, right? An AI agent is a task-specific agent that you have developed. On the other hand, agentic AI is a broader workflow getting orchestrated to accomplish in an enterprise, right? So that's how we differentiate between these two, right? Very clearly, you need an orchestration layer on top of all of these things for you to bring this AI to coordinate with each other, pass on the task outputs to each other, connect with tools and subsystems, right? Your existing infrastructure that you have, all of them needs to be brought in together, right? And that's why, AI agents working together in an orchestrated manner, and humans overseeing this is a norm, right? That's how best it can be explained.
Yeah, I think people think about an agent sometimes being like a person or a robot. It's just a bunch of tasks, right, that have been merged together to create an outcome. And am I right that usually it's best, as you're saying, it's better to have many agents doing different outcomes versus creating agents that are responsible for generating 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 outcomes, because then it gets hard to really sort out the
Yeah.
problems. Am I right?
It depends on the business use
Depends.
case, right? Typically, you see larger enterprises needing to have multiple agents in an agentic framework, working together collectively to produce a business process outcome. In some cases, it could be, and you can think of this as, for example, if you're using agentified process for your own personal work, you probably will have every agent mapped to a particular task.
Have you ever gotten feedback? Like I did this agent for my calendar or my email, and because of that, I was able to have some big gains, or is it still just a whole bunch of?
Absolutely. I mean, look at it from this perspective, tons and tons of Excel sheets. If you have to interpret all of that, what is going on in an Excel sheet and create a highly summarized version of PowerPoint, imagine how long does it take you? You spend 8 hours in just going through the Excel sheet and producing this content. And if you
Who
have
hasn't done that?
if you've thought through well, if you can instruct your systems as to, basically it's prompt engineering. Suddenly I feel that, the importance of learning good English has become very key and important, right? Prompt engineering is all
Yeah.
about crafting your instructions to the, language models, how they should, what sort of an input that they should consider, and
Yes.
how should they behave, how should they produce the output, and what format they should produce. It's all English being written in and provided as prompts at the end of the day, right? So it's a skill that most will pick up. It needs to be wired, and I think the world is going in that direction now. Whether it is personal or in your professional environment, building an application or building something for your own, that becomes common.
Asking the right questions, has become even more important than ever. Because yes, we always need to think about asking questions to our team and to people,
Right.
but in the technology sense, still very important. Now, leaders who are thinking about, okay, I need to offload some things to AI. What decisions, just thinking about decisions specifically, what does the person own versus what do they offload to an agentic agent process?
From an engineering perspective, right? I can just pivot to what we do at Ascendion, right? We are an engineering company at the end of the day, right? We build applications for our clients. We generate tons and tons of code. Clients, say with some clients, they are onto legacy platforms. We help them modernize their applications to the newer technology stacks. We use AI everywhere, right? And through the entire engineering process. So from that perspective, from a human standpoint, again, considering the subset of what I spoke about, remember the guardrails, we keep talking about this guardrails, guardrails to in, what props to be provided, the design and architectural aspects of how to go about the specifications of how you want your code to come out, you want the application to come out. All of that is still a human thinking, and that's what you prompt. That is what you provide context. So context, prompts, harness, guardrails are typically human activity. And when something comes out as an output, validating and verifying this, that is it accurate? Is that what we expected out of the system? Is it matching? Should I go back and reprompt if something has not come out well? That's typically the human activity, right? And now where AI comes in is that it takes all of these inputs, keeps the context, understands the guardrails, and works within that scope to produce an output. And that's where AI systems come into play, right? All of the agents, typically when think of agents, we spoke about agents at play, right? What do agents do? If humans have done all of these things right, agents go about their task in that controlled environment, right? And then people come back and see what it has produced. Is it
Radha, what have you seen happen when humans do not check the output?
One word: disaster.
Disaster. Can you give me some? All right, double click on that. To use an old term. What has been one of the biggest disasters you've seen when humans do not check?
The biggest disaster that needs to be prevented upfront is you haven't verified what has come out. Sometimes what happens is that all these large language models that we've been talking about, the results may look very positive. The results may look very accurate. The results look very decent, when you just glance through them, right? And that's where the big probability of the hallucination that happens in most cases, right? It gets undetected, unchecked. And in a controlled environment, it looks perfectly fine. But if you take it up and implement it in large scale, all of that shows up, right? And that's the disaster that you see all the time. The biases are very evident. And we have seen systems going completely rogue to an extent that the responses could be completely racial. It is unacceptable in almost all cases.
What happened? Like what happened when that? Like what was the consequence?
The consequence is trust. At the end of the day, if somebody is using this system, the system goes rogue, you lose the trust. That's it. And after that, it takes a very, very, very long time to put corrective actions to get back to normalcy.
What are you saying to your team? Well, because your team is in charge of implementing all this. How are you getting them? I mean, this is a huge responsibility. I'm assuming a lot of pressure. It's probably a very intense work environment. How are you leading them?
So I think the first important thing is that don't make AI something that you would select, make it native, right? AI should be wired. AI, that's why we call it as AI native. There's a big difference between AI native and AI first. The moment you say AI first, it almost looks like, okay, I have a choice, right? I can play around. When you say AI native, you don't have anything else. All that you do is just AI. From that perspective, that learning becomes very important, right? Everybody in the system, every one of my team members have to be completely AI native. They think in AI terms. That's the most important fact for them, right? And that needs to be wired, and that needs to be their DNA.
When do you know as a leader it's time to press the accelerator on your AI projects and put all your chips in?
When your output, when what's getting generated of the system is highly consistent, your systems are thoroughly tested and validated for the output that it generates, that your guardrails are kicking in, that your environment can be controlled the way you want it, right? And that's when you start to build. And that's what you press the accelerator. That's where you press the gas pedal fast and say that you can actually scale and put that to good use across the enterprise. And so that checking on the gates become very important as part of the life cycle.
How much of your day is in gate checking before you press the accelerator versus pressing the accelerator?
From day one. See, I see that whole concept of I finish a product, I test it, worked in the previous years. With AI coming in, it is continuous. It is from day one till the last day you declare victory, that I have something that produces consistent result within the guardrails, and the results are absolutely good for me to go with. That entire process starts on day one. There is no test at the end of the cycle. There is no verification at the end of the cycle. So you continuously test, verify.
Because it's too late.
Yep.
Yeah, if you wait to the end of the cycle, you're too late and things have already changed. And you might even not be testing the right thing anymore.
Okay. Absolutely.
What are you hiring for in people that seem to thrive in an environment like this?
Again,
think about skills, mindset, talent. Like, what are you looking for?
All of it, actually. All of it. And I think, AI, being an AI native person does not mean that you don't need to have the skill sets in programming, problem solving. All that is required, because the output that gets produced in the engineering part of it, you still need to look into the code and see whether it's generated the right code or not. Right? We call it as a human in the loop. It, like the way in the agentic processes, the output that comes out of the agent, sometimes you see that it's we use terms like completely autonomous, semi-autonomous, or assisted agent. We call we different constructs that we use. Right? But in very simplistic terms, that you don't always trust an agent's output. So you need a human to, as soon as the output comes up, you need a human to verify, validate, and approve. That's typically how it works in most of the cases.
How much of your job do you spend, and maybe this is more for like a Ascendion question, educating your clients on this process? Because I'm wondering, like, what are you seeing as their knowledge base as a general group versus what you have? And I'm assuming that they are not AI native yet. And do you take it upon I'm curious, what is the information gap between the people on the ground, like your team, and then the top executives running large organizations in the world? What's the gap there?
It depends on the organization. Some of them, would have started piloting in smaller, some of the smaller business units, fairly risk, averse, right? We can bite the bullet. So there is some exposure there. And most often than not, the emphasis is on testing out a new tool in AI or a technology that comes into play, rather than thinking about the governance standards and all that what we talked about. It should go south. It should things fail. How do we react? And that's a place we struggle, right? Most clients struggle. That's one area where we work with them very closely, form governance teams early on, joint governance team, joint review cycles. In the process, we help them learn. We do training sessions and help them understand how things go. Why is this a new paradigm shift and an approach, which is very different from the conventional techniques that they are used to. So all of that is in education that we have to go.
Are you talking to them about governance more, or hey, you can speed up more? Like, do they come wanting speed, or they come wanting governance first? How are they thinking about it?
Yeah, so the initial approach to us is almost always we need speed. We need this technology to be put to use as quickly as possible, generate output and scale. That's how it happens. So I said, if we then sit with them, talk to them and say that we will do that, but just hold on. That's not how it works. Right. So
what do you say to them? So you probably have this conversation a whole lot. What do you say to them specifically about governance that seems to break through? Like, you can tell them a whole bunch of stuff. But what is the line or the idea that like leaders seem to be able to really grasp on governance?
We go as far as, telling them that who owns the decision at the end of the day, right? Do you,
Okay.
in your, it's not just the governance. When you are actually putting these agentic processes to good work, right? Who's in charge of it, right? Everybody believes that, it's all working fine. No one wants it up at the end of the day because it's, people almost always start with the proof of concept, right? It works great, but who's going to ultimately own the outcomes that it generates? Success or failure, who's going to be owning it, right? That's part of governance, right? And fixing responsibility.
Do you find in those conversations, they want Ascendion, they want your team to own the decision is how they come? And my assumption is you're like, no. Someone inside your organization owns this, and that is like a flipped, that flips their mindset.
So you see, we can handhold them. We got to be transparent with them. At the end of the day, it's the enterprise's data, it's the enterprise's processes, it's the enterprise's business outcome that is defined. Of course, we'll help them. We'll walk them through the entire process. That's why we are here for. Our systems and our platforms that we bring in, a lot of that is baked in. For example, AAVA that we use as our orchestration platform allows us to bring a lot of these controls and guardrails enterprise-wide. We make sure that the knowledge is captured, the guardrails are embedded, the standards are imposed, so that when an enterprise starts using our orchestration platform, there is all of that actually gets percolated down to department level, at a programmer level in most cases, or somebody who's developing an AI agent. For example, with AAVA, you cannot develop an agent and just take it to production. Right? It goes through several verification processes in the workflow. The workflow is predefined. Somebody has to approve and authorize and say that we have validated and verified for the guardrails and the output it generates. Now, this agent is good to go for production deployment, right? So to that extent, the platform controls. So we will walk them through all of this. We will work with the clients to make sure they understand all of this stuff and be with us in the process. And in the process, teach them, help them learn.
So can you walk us through an example of where like a client came in, you walked them through that, and sort of like what was the decision-making process for who to assign the responsibility to?
No, absolutely. I think very clearly there are two sets of teams that we will deal with in the process, right? From an engineering perspective, it is the organization of a CTO or a CIO that work with very closely. That's mostly on the coding standards, security, safety of what is being run, either inside an agent or an application that comes out of it. We need clear ownership of saying that what is your coding standards, what is the programming standards, what sort of technology stack and security governance security that needs to be put in place, right? Can you tell us what your organization security standards are, right? And somebody has to.
So that would be more in the IT realm of a company. It's very technical, and they've got to talk to your engineering team for the design piece.
That's correct. So before we start putting these constructs that develop this application of programming code and so on and so forth, we need to work with them very closely to find out what security stands on. That's one piece. Other piece is when we work with business and we are orchestrating business processes via the agents, it completely changes. For example, who's narrating the story to us, right? Which part of the business is, for example, if you want a young adult to open a bank account, it's a process by itself. And if you want to modernize user experience of onboarding, a young adult opening an account in your system, who's responsible for orchestrating the process, right? Who's responsible for telling us how this entire workflow should be conceived and put together, right? So, and every part of it, what gets exposed, what doesn't get exposed, what are the guardrails, that comes into play. So you work with a variety of teams, and each of these teams can bring their own, accountability and responsibility to the mix. That's all part of the governance model that we put together.
I think that's the big question for leaders now, because before they were maybe assigning responsibilities to their team. Okay, you're in charge of HR, you're in charge of onboarding. However, if there's another level that these teams are doing, especially if you're bringing in AI into these processes. And like you said, onboarding, that's not a tech AI thing in the past that people would think about using AI agents and processes for, because you had like 40 people doing this stuff and it was manual. And now the human resource people might actually get back to actually doing the people work because they've got agents involved helping them do a lot of the sort of the red tape kind of stuff. However, someone in HR has to be responsible for the guardrails, for checking the quality output. And I don't want to scare people too much here, but let's say your process is hallucinating 10% of the time and you don't do anything to change it and you let that process run.
Right.
The hallucination piece will grow, won't it? If you allow it to run even on a 5% or 10% hallucination, it'll become a bigger thing, right?
Become a bigger issue, right? So somebody needs to go back and retrain, and make sure that it is within the acceptable thresholds and limits. It's a continuous process as we speak, right? And that's why we create roles. It just goes beyond the technology specialist in AI that are actually working on creating agents and things like that. Even program management is as key and a vital aspect in AI-driven programs typically, right? In fact, we've even created a new position called Agentic delivery managers. They think very differently, right?
Okay. Agentic delivery managers, what is that?
Unlike conventional program management where everything is measured according to a metric, the way it was defined 25 years back, that's what the industry has been, working. It was all human-centric metric, right? What is a human's productivity? How long does it take for you to develop this complexity of a program? What is the level of skill in your team that you are actually going with when the program gets executed? Think of all of that, and for a second, shift gears and see that AI is at play in engineering, right? AI is orchestrating the entire engineering methodology now. AI is producing code. AI is producing, design. AI is part of architecture, right? Now, when all of that is offloaded to AI, what decisions do we own? That needs to be defined. That's where an agentic delivery manager comes in, right? And suddenly, what if an agent escalates about a human? It's the reverse escalation that it's quite possible, right? Now, how much of guardrails to tighten? How much of guardrails to loosen? Guardrails are there for a reason, but if you overscrew them, nothing really comes out, right? You lose, it hallucinates heavily. The results are inconsistent. It produces results that look appealing, but in reality, it holds no good. right?
3 to 5 years
when,
from now, go ahead, Radha. Finish your thought there.
yeah, when to tighten, when to loosen up, that becomes an important aspect as well, right? Which agents do we think at some point in time can go from semi-autonomous to autonomous? We have consistent results. We have seen a benchmark.
Yep.
99% of the time, the agent is working in full throttle, producing great results. It's time for us to promote to completely autonomous so that human intervention is not required. Who takes a call, right? Who identifies the gap between the stated intent and the outcome that comes out of the system? What is the gap, right?
Yeah.
How can we go to the drawing? So it's a new breed of delivery management that we are talking about when agents are at play and AI is at play.
It's so important. I hope the leaders listening to this right now, it's giving them a deeper insight onto what it's like to work with an organization like yours, first of all, and how they can be good customers to get the right results. Now, getting your crystal ball out 3 to 5 years from now, what separates companies that successfully run AI-driven enterprises from the ones that never really get control?
Speed is important. Scale is important. But controlling speed and scale to producing consistent results is even more important than anything else. That's a crystal ball, right? Organizations
Consistency of results.
Yes, consistency of results. All the guardrails, compliance, regulatory, whatever you want to call, right? No one says speed is not important, but if speed is the only thing that you rush into, producing inconsistent results, putting your reputation at risk, that's a bigger disaster than anything else, right? So organizations that focus on creating these control systems, right, that produce consistent results at scale are the ones that will survive, are the ones that will see greater success with this. That's my crystal ball. I think most organizations are striving. If not, this is going to be research in the labs.
Well, I like that. I didn't expect that response, but it makes a lot of sense to me. I hope leaders are taking this away. Like it's more over time with AI going about consistency, delivering positive results through your process versus, man, we sure did go fast, but maybe we took 3 steps forward, 4 steps back because we had problems. It's better to go faster, but not fast.
Yeah. I mean, it's very simple, right? Bad output compounds everything. All of what you try to do just vanishes in just one day. Right? If trust erodes, it has consequences internally and externally. The last thing is that by nature, AI systems learn as they go forward. And one thing that you don't want them to learn is learn through bad examples and bad patterns.
I think that's a very important idea. We're like, there's this idea of, and I've heard it like in sales circles, we're always teaching, like your children are always watching you. You're always teaching them, maybe you're not talking to them. Or you're teaching your customers how to treat you. In AI world that's all observant of the data points coming in, we're always teaching it. And if we allow it to continue to learn on the things that aren't helpful to our business or helpful to the world, it keeps heading in that wrong direction. You might go from a mediocre data set to a really bad data set, bad outcome within a very small time.
Absolutely.
Wow, man. Ooh, it's been a fun today. Let's finish on a light note. What areas of your life, like your personal life, have you had the most fun leveraging AI?
Say that again.
Where in your personal life have you had the most fun leveraging AI in your personal life?
Man, you should have seen my desktop. Like, thousands of Excels, thousands of PowerPoints, thousands of PDFs. It's a nightmare. And I can tell you for once, my desktop looks totally clean now, completely organized. And some of what I experiment and do with my stuff with AI, I produce content that I need to consume in no time. Right? I just feed in a bunch of stuff and it just gets everything done. Right? It's great fun working with that.
Wow.
Sometimes I test the LLMs with all sorts of crazy questions just to see where is the breaking point, and that's great fun.
Okay, a break testing it. How did you use it to clean up your desktop?
I just developed a small agent myself using Claude on my Mac, and just a brilliant job. It's just a very small instruction set that I created and said that these are all the folders that I've got, and just go over the entire system. It's a brilliant.
And it just took them off.
Yeah, it just runs for a few minutes, asks for a few permissions, and then cleans it up. I just run it once a week.
Man, I do not want to show you my desktop because I've got way too much on there. So maybe I'm gonna have to apply the Radha method. Oh, it's been a fun one, sir. Thanks for joining us on AI and Native Leaders.
Thank you, Ben. Truly appreciate it. Thanks for your time.